Trying to date a rock is hard. You see, as I wandered through Annesburg, I wondered what the oldest rock in Red Dead Redemption 2 could be. And I thought to myself, well, surely it can't be all that hard to figure out. I study this stuff. Well, not exactly. I'm not a dating specialist. I'm single. Anyway, for this video, we need to find a method to determine the age of rocks in Red Dead Redemption 2, and then we need to actually find said rocks. Now, in the real world, we have a good selection of tools available to date a rock. My problem is that most of them require analysis in a laboratory, which, well, I don't think we have the necessary equipment available here. It's a bit of a shame because, in a way, these methods are a simple way to accurately get the age of a rock. Probably the most well-known example of these so-called numerical methods is the radiocarbon method, which is also referred to as the 14C method, and not exclusive to geology. Heck, I'd argue that it's a surprise that it has use in geology. You see, for this method we make use of the ratio between carbon isotopes to determine the age of a sample. 12C is the normal isotope of carbon, whereas 14C is a radioactive species with 2 extra neutrons. What's interesting is that 14C constantly gets produced in the atmosphere and ends up in anything that is made with carbon, which means anything living. And because organisms cycle a lot of carbon in their lifetime, the ratio of 12C to 14C in living things is quite stable until the cycling ends. But the death of the heroic organism was not in vain, because now the 14C atoms that decay into 14 nitrogen do not get replaced, and over time the ratio of 14C to 12C tends to go towards 0, leaving mostly 12C behind. The only thing that's left to do is to analyze a sample in a mass spectrometer, which is a device that can give us the exact number of carbon isotopes that were in the sample. Then we use a calibrated chart to read out the age. It sounds simple, but there are certain time periods in history where you can end up with 2 or more possible age ranges, which is a bit of a pain. In those cases, you'd look for other indicators that could narrow down the possibilities. Luckily, in some cases, you end up with a fairly precise year as the result of the analysis. Major limitation with this method is that once all the 14C has decayed, it will be impossible to determine the age range of a sample. The consequence of this is that we are limited to a maximum age range of 50,000 to 75,000 years before present. Side note, in this case, present means the year 1950. Don't worry about it. Anyway, a more practical problem is that quite often when you try to date a sedimentary rock, which is usually formed under bodies of water, some material that does not belong to a certain layer could get mixed up and contaminate your sample, leading to false age indications. Despite all that, the radiocarbon method remains one of the most convenient methods to get an age estimate for the recent past. Then again, I'm interested in the oldest rocks I can find in this world, and I'm pretty sure the recent past is a little too young for me here. What I need is a properly problematic age gap. For that, I need to elaborate a little on where we usually find old rocks. Assuming the world in RDR2 had a similar genesis as the real one, it would have also started its life as a humid hot hunk of material arranged in an approximately spherical manner, forming oceans and continents before we know it. But to further understand where we can find the oldest rocks, we need to know more about the wonderful world of plate tectonics. For that, imagine that the outermost layer, the Earth's crust, sits on top of a viscous fluid. I think it's important to note here that there is no actual liquid layer below the crust, but if you fast forward time, it may look like there is. Anyway, fresh crust forms in the middle of the oceans at mid-ocean ridges. This process, called rifting, keeps pushing the marine plates away from the rift towards the continental plates, but because 2 cannot go into 1, something has to give. In these zones where tectonic plates are on a collision course, the marine plate that approaches a continental plate usually will sink below it, because the fresher crust coming from the sea is denser, thus heavier. It subsides beneath the continental crust, which is a bit lighter on average. Of course, when the marine plate sinks towards the Earth's core, the temperature around it rises and ultimately it will melt. That puts a hard limit on the age of the material in marine plates, which leaves the continental plates as our candidates for finding the oldest rocks in Red Dead Redemption 2. But what you won't find there is this segue to the sponsor of today's video, me. My name is Schaddn and I study Earth system science. Am I a good student? Well, no, evidently, but I am passionate about the Earth systems and gaming. So if you'd like to see more of the latter, I often stream live over at Twitch or here on YouTube, usually at 8 PM Central European summertime. Thank you for being here and I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video. As some people pointed out under the last video, there is a side quest in the game that tasks you with finding dinosaur bones, which is incredibly exciting. You see, simply by existing here, dinosaur skeletons give us a minimum age of the material that we can find, 66 million years. That's because roughly 66 million years ago, an extinction event wiped out pretty much all the dinosaurs at once. But the information that the bones give us don't stop there. No, not only is their existence a hint at the age of the material, but their locations also reveal information about the world. At first, I thought the bones were randomly placed in the world, you know, as you would expect from a video game. But at a second glance, I realized that the bone locations seem to be arranged in a kind of band shape. And as if that wasn't curious enough, the band runs perpendicular to the general direction of the elevation change. And sure enough, checking against the 3D map, it seems like the dinosaur bones are all located in roughly the same layer. The cool thing that we can infer from this is that there must be older rocks here, because everything beneath the bone layers is most likely older than the layers containing the bones. That's because typically material is built up from the ground, so the oldest rocks are at the bottom, while newer ones sit at the top, at least for sedimentary rock formations. So let's find a place that allows us to look at lower layers. East of the Wapiti Indian Reservation lies Calumet Ravine. Clearly, we can see a rock face that is distinct from the granites and igneiss that we saw west of this location at Granite Pass. Now, here in Calumet Ravine, we can observe a friendly red hue of varying darkness. That tells us that the material is most likely rich in iron. There also appears to be a distinct darker red band in this formation. Now the placement of it feels a bit off, but let's say that this part has been lifted up from its original place further below the surface by the processes that formed the surrounding mountains. I think it's possible that we are looking at what is intended to depict a banded iron formation. Now these banded iron formations are a remnant of the earliest part in the history of life on Earth, from the Precambrian eon. They were deposited as iron-rich waters welled up into a region of the oceans that housed cyanobacteria, which are the bacteria that made all the oxygen back in the days. This led to the oxidation of all those iron ions, which then fell out to the bottom of the seabed roughly 2.4 billion years ago, forming the rust-colored bands we see today. If we are right, these are the oldest rocks we found so far. That of course raises the question, can we go older? Oh yes, as is so often the case in these videos, we are back in the Grizzlies, higher up than ever before. But why? Well, as I was doing a little research on the oldest rocks on Earth, I was led to the Morton gneiss, roughly 3.5 billion years old. Now I know that I'm not really in the right geomorphology, it does not look like the right place, but the only place I knew that I was likely to find gneiss is up here. At this point, I should probably tell you how we even get to say that some rocks have ridiculous ages like 3.5 billion years. You see, there exists a special mineral called zircon, and these zircon crystals can be found in rocks of magmatic origins, rocks that were initially formed when magma cooled down. Now when all the atoms come together to create the zircon crystal, there is also a trace amount of uranium present. And as you might know, uranium is radioactive and decays into lead. Now the special thing about the zircon crystal is that it will not incorporate any lead when it forms, because lead just does not fit into the crystal lattice. However, the uranium that is already in the crystal will decay into lead over time, and this lead stays in the zircon. How is it useful? Once again, just like with the Fortin C method, we atomize a sample with a laser and measure how many atoms of each type there are with a mass spectrometer. Then, because we know the decay constants of uranium and because we know that the sum of all the uranium and lead from the decay process must be the initial amount of uranium, we can simply calculate the age from the ratio of uranium to lead in the zircon crystal. Conceptually, it's an incredibly easy process, but actually measuring these tiny samples with reasonable precision is the hard part. Anyway, looking around the area, I was desperately searching for anything that could give me a hint at the age of the gneiss there. Then, like a glimmer of hope, a red glint was visible in the mountains. But in my opinion, that is a layer formed by violent volcanic activity. Ironically, this almost confirms the volcanic activity that I was looking for in another video, but it's not very useful in this one. Next, I tried to make use of the nearby glacier, and while I will gladly talk at length about it in another video, because it's genuinely really interesting how well you can see its impact on the world, ultimately it can only tell us about the past in the last few 10,000 years. So once again, venturing far north in RDR2 was interesting, but I could not find what I was looking for. With all that we've found so far in mind, let's head back to Annesburg and I'll show you the last contender for the oldest rock in Red Dead Redemption 2 on the way. People who watch my YouTube shorts have seen this one before. It's a meteorite. Funny enough, it descended fairly recently, which we know because the corpses that were claimed by a fragment of this thing have not fully decayed yet. While that makes it one of the youngest geomorphological features, the material contained in the actual meteorite is bound to be quite old. Let's take a closer look while we go over the different kinds of meteorites. Just like magma on Earth, they generally come in two types. Mostly made of silicates, the first type are stony meteorites. A subgroup of those called chondrites is made up of the material that initially formed our solar system, like a ball of prehistoric dust. Pretty cool, and also pretty old. But that is not what we're dealing with here, right above the Roanoke Valley. No, this one here is an iron meteorite, and those are remnants of the center of asteroids with a molten core where heavy elements like iron and nickel fell out and then sunk towards the middle of the asteroid. Now on the way down to Earth, the surface gets heated from the friction with air to the point where it starts melting. That's where it gets its signature oxide layer and distinctive form from. What's really cool about this impact site is that you can clearly tell that whatever happened created a shockwave that bent all the trees away from the center. But then I thought something doesn't feel right here. It seemed like the scale was off, because I knew that most craters are much larger since smaller meteorites often disintegrate on the way down. So I went digging a little and I found the Whitecourt impact crater, which lines up pretty well with the parameters of the crater here, and even the estimated 1 meter diameter of the projectile before impact seems to match somewhat. However, the Whitecourt iron meteorite fragmented upon impact and the shrapnel was flung downrange. Additionally, the real impact crater does not feature the bent trees, so I felt a little bit stumped. Checking the RDR2 wiki, the crater is suspected to be reminiscent of the Tunguska event, which is a crater of debated origin that also has bent trees and is rumored to be a remnant of an experiment by Nikola Tesla. This hypothesis is given some credibility by the fact that close to the mysterious crater we can find the home of an NPC who is a parody of Mr. Tesla, but of course the Tunguska event was much larger in scale than the Roanoke Ridge crater, which is why I'm inclined to believe that it was made in the image of the Whitecourt event. Though we still have one final question to answer. How old is it? Well, to be completely honest, I cannot tell you for sure how old this meteorite is, because for some reason, no one ever properly dated that rock. However, because this is an iron meteorite, which is the class that is formed in the center of asteroids, we can make an educated guess. NASA states meteorites that originate from asteroids are all roughly 4.5 billion years old. And with that, we have dethroned our previous contender for oldest rock, the banded iron formations of Calumet Ravine. Dear viewers, it is my pleasure to announce that the oldest rock that you can find in Red Dead Redemption 2 is indeed the rock that had fallen from the heavens. And that will be it from my side. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, feel free to call me out in the comments about what I got wrong. Until we see each other next time, I hope you have a wonderful time. Goodbye.